Who am I around? What are they doing to me? What have they got me reading? What have they got me saying? Where do they have me going? What do they have me thinking? And most importantly, what do they have me becoming? And is that okay? So this is the questions you need to ask yourself when you're taking advice from your peers, just the people you spend time with that you get around. Today, I'm talking about who should we take advice from? And it's a huge topic that I kind of brought up on Facebook today. Just I was questioning that about myself and about the books I've been reading, the people I learned from, the people who have given me advice in the past. And one of the books that I'm reading just now is Principles by Ray Dalio, which is Ray Dalio is a very wise man. He's like very rich. I think net worth of £18 billion. So when you start learning from people like this, they really have a completely different perspective from the people to the left and right of you, depending on where you've grown up. But very rarely we're brought up with billionaires all around us. So when you start taking advice from that side of things, it really changes your mindset. Ray Dalio is a very successful man, and I just kind of had that thought: why am I learning from Ray Dalio this morning? Like, why am I reading his book over everyone else's book? And one of the things that came up as well is when he was making a point about being radically open-minded and realizing and being open about having weaknesses, and being open about having needing other people's advice and not having all the answers. Whereas just not long ago, I was reading a book where the author of that book actually said, just say that you've got all the answers and people will follow you. So like, we have this kind of silly belief that the influencers in this world and on social media that are around us need to, we think they know everything, but they really don't. And sometimes they display that image that they know all the answers. And the people who are ultra successful, such as Ray Dalio and the billionaires and ultra successful of history, actually are quite open about the fact that they don't have all the answers, and they're very reliant on other people. Like Henry Ford had people for doing almost everything that he couldn't do, and had really have to have like sidekicks around them to be able to function. So they recognized their weaknesses, and they brought the people in to do that, and they didn't come out and have all the answers. These people who are living and just doing and having the experience are the people who really understand how the world works, and just through that experience themselves, rather than people who show up before they've had some life experience and show up as a teacher. The best, they say, the best teacher is the best student. So whoever was for example, Warren Buffett was the best student of Benjamin Graham, who wrote the book Intelligent Investor. So the best student then becomes the best teacher, because they have all this information, but also is the person with the most experience. Not necessarily, I heard someone's comment, it was more of kind of a joke, but it was about the idea that who do you find out who to learn from? And one of the answers were the person with the most experience. So that's a good answer. But then the other answer was about they look for like a grey beard. And I've always had this opinion that wisdom doesn't come from age. It actually comes from a substance. It comes from a lot of experience. There's that famous William Wallace quote that I can't remember off the top of my head just now, but he says it's along the lines of you must... I've completely forgot it right now. It's about truly living, and there's no substance for that. You could easily hide in a room your whole life and get a grey beard, and you've got some experience from learning about that room that you stayed in. But the person who goes out and actually experiences life to the full will come back and have all the lessons to teach. It's those people we want to learn from. So that's why I went right to the top. Like I learned from people like Will Durant, who was a historian, who really did gather experience through his research and traveling. And he spent 50 years studying history and studying kind of principles and philosophers and kings, and really seeing like and analyzing like the truth about what was the result of why they were successful and why they failed. Like things come up in history, like Will Durant's made me aware of as well, about things such as one philosopher says human by nature are evil, and then another philosopher says human by nature are good. So like, who do you follow? And that's the big contradiction, like where you get in when you read enough books and you do enough, go to enough workshops, and you hear literally polar opposite advice from people. So it's definitely having that open mind is so important, and hearing other people's opinions, and even like following Ralph Waldo Emerson's advice, where he says, in every man, in some way, he is my superior, and in that I will learn from him. So he basically means that you can learn from everyone, but you can learn from their failures, you can learn from their how they're superior than you as well. You can learn how they're better from what they're better than you. So there's always people. We all obviously have the kind of quadrants of like where we fit as a personality type, and we do tend to fit in one or the other. And so if you're up here and the other person's down here, they have like completely different talents and skills and abilities to you, and they can kind of fill in those blind spots that you have from your perspective. You're maybe more a creative person, this person's a wee bit more logical and direct. So you have to make better decisions, because that's why we read books, that's why we learn from other people and go to teachers. We want to make better decisions in their life and their business and their careers, and we go to teachers for that. It's not the idea of going to a teacher, it's going to someone who can mentor you, who can really like show you the way, and they have to be aligned with your actual visions and goals as well. So there's a lot of parts to it, but I definitely do think that the best people we can learn from are not just the teachers of the world, but the people who maybe aren't even alive today, that we can go and look back on, who we're kind of, I would say, legacy focused rather than selfish or money focused for themselves. To figure out, like Ray Dalio was a perfect example of that. He's lived his life. He's really been successful in his career, and now he's at an older age. I don't think that matters as much, but you can kind of tell who's legacy focused and who's not. So Ray Dalio is kind of at this stage of life where he really doesn't need to write the book Principle and share all these lessons, and he really does make a point in that he is kind of focused on giving this back for future generations when he passes now. And it's believable because he's made his billions. He doesn't actually need to work. And when we're learning from people who might be earning from their teaching, then you have to be a bit skeptical about that, because they need to act as if they've got all the facts and they know it all. Whereas look at someone who's actually been around long enough to actually experience it. I actually had the opportunity to speak to Grant Cardone, his business booster, his business boot camp at Glasgow just this last year, and I asked him in that question directly how his personal development has evolved and what he's learning these days. Like, not what he's learned. He talked about a wee bit about how he learned from Tom Hopkins and Brian Tracy. So like, I'm always wondering, who do these guys learn from that I'm following? Who do these teachers that I'm learning from learn from? And I like to get to that as well. Like, who is this guy's coach? Just to question that, and then sometimes jump forward a wee bit rather than getting regurgitated information from people. Anyway, Grant Cardone went on to explain a couple of kind of, to answer that question. He's very selective, and I would say it's definitely follow that rule as well. I'm very selective, and it's why I was set up Ben's Business Book Club. So I didn't just take the reviews that were on Amazon. I was taking it from Amazon and then deciding on that book through my own from others in a sort of community based on people who've actually read the book, and maybe not just promoting it and for getting the book for free to give them a 5-star review on Amazon. So I just wanted to be really careful of like who I was going to go ahead with. But there's also other layers to it that Grant Cardone talked about as well. He wants to like select the ultra successful. Walt Disney was one of the people he mentioned, and that he had went bankrupt 3 times, but he'd really been around long enough to experience enough to then share it back into someone that you can study volumes of and go really deep with, and just so he could know everything about that one person. So he really just like focused on one person at a time and went really deep with them. And I found that really interesting. They don't need to be alive was another thing he mentioned. And again, ultra successful, legacy focused people were who he liked to learn from, and he kind of mentioned that that's what himself and his wife are focused on as well, and that's probably why he's gathered such a large following as well. So that's the kind of rules I follow as well. It's about being open-minded enough, and as Ray Dalio calls it, radically open-mindedness. So to the point that you can get out of the way of your own ego and receive and realize that you could be wrong. Having all the answers is not right. It's not, even if you are a teacher, people appreciate the vulnerability and honesty from you, that you don't have the answer for that, but it's so important to take the perspective from other people, because then when it broadens your perspective for making decisions. It doesn't weaken your ability to make a decision. It just broadens your decision making by just quickly picking up some and gathering some information. So it's like a 2-step process. You don't just decide what you want to go ahead with in your head. You have to make it kind of to make a decision. It's best to gather up from relevant data and information, and then step 2 is to then decide. So that's kind of my opinion, and a couple of people that I could recommend that I kind of went a step higher up. I feel like that people I see as ultra successful. Definitely Will Durant, who spent 50 years in really studying and had prizes and everything for his writing and his historical writings on the story of civilization, and he really analysed and did lots of mini biographies of all like successful people from his time and backwards, all the way back 3,000 years. So definitely don't just follow the trends, the social media influencers, the people who are influencing right now. You don't have to follow Donald Trump. You don't have to follow Gary Vee. You don't have to follow the people that everyone else is following. That doesn't necessarily mean they're right. It's a good idea to also look at historical figures and people who are successful and over a long period of time, and look at go way back to ancient Greece and look at the people who were successful then that we're still talking about today, who've stood the test of time, and their knowledge and wisdom is still being passed through the generations. So that's a couple of ways that rules that I follow for when I'm taking advice from people. And I'm just kind of open to receiving from anyone around me, and I am protective at the same time and selective of who I get myself around, because no matter what, they will get into your subconscious with their opinions. So remember that quote from Jim Rohn: what are they doing to me, and is that okay? And if it's not okay, don't be around them. Just get out of their space, because their space isn't serving you. And if you realize that someone's not serving you anymore, it's best not to be around them. I have a rule as well that I got out of the book. I think it was the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch. And this is just an action step for you, is that like to figure out what are they doing to you, is a A4 sheet of paper, happiness island, unhappiness island, or you could call it successful island, unsuccessful island. You can have 2 sheets of paper for this and put some of the information underneath that and some of the information underneath that. If people appear on one side that's like not causing you happiness or success, you could decide to spend less time with them. And that's one of the ways to be around the right people as well. So I hope you found this helpful. This is Ben's Business Podcast, episode number 66. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, please just leave it in the comments. And if you watched this on the replay, just write in #replay. Dylan's just left a comment. Yes, vulnerability is a strength, and Principles is a highly recommended book. Thanks for joining, Dylan. Thanks for joining, Ian, Ryan, Leon, Leslie, Daniel, Craig, and everyone else. Thanks for joining.